Most people think that if someone's quiet, distant, or doesn't show emotion the way we expect, it must mean they don't care. But that's a lie we've been sold by our conditioning. The truth is avoidants feel love deeply, they just express it differently, and when you learn to look beneath the surface, the patterns are undeniable. Today, I'm going to show you the signs, the proof that even the most guarded hearts are overflowing with love, because love isn't about how loud someone shouts it, it's about the subtle ways they show up, again and again. Because when it comes to avoidance, silence is the loudest noise you'll ever hear. Most people misread it. They think if they're not speaking to me, if they're not showing up, must mean they don't care. That's the surface level interpretation. But the truth is, for someone with an avoidant attachment style, silence doesn't mean absence. It means they are on the battlefield and the battle isn't with you. It's inside them. You have to understand the psychology here. Avoidants live with a paradox in their wiring. They crave closeness just like anyone else. When they get it, their system interprets it as danger. It's not rational. It's survival-based. The closer they feel, the more they sense a loss of control. And that loss of control triggers their deepest fear, emotional engulfment. So when they step back, they're not stepping back from you. They're stepping back from the intensity of what they feel for you. This is where most people get blindsided. You think love should always move forward, but for them, love often feels like being pulled into deep water when they don't know how to swim. That's why the more they love you, the more intense the retreat can be. Their nervous system is screaming at them to protect themselves, to regulate, to create distance so they can breathe. But here's the twist. If you didn't matter, they wouldn't need that distance. If you were just another casual connection, there'd be no emotional overload, no internal war. The very fact that they need space is evidence you've penetrated the wall they've spent years building. Think about that for a moment. Avoidants are masters at keeping their lives emotionally safe. They can be charming, social, and even affectionate, but it's all within boundaries they control. You get close enough to trigger their retreat, it's because you've crossed into territory no one else has reached. You've become a variable they can't fully manage, and that shakes them to their core. Now, the silence is not just about avoiding you. It's about them processing, and processing for an avoidant is not done in the open. It's done in the quiet corners of their mind where they replay interactions, examine their feelings like a scientist handling dangerous chemicals, and wrestle with the contradiction of wanting you and fearing you at the same time. Every minute they spend in that silence is part of that battle. Fight versus flight, love versus self-be protection. Here's where people destroy their chances without realizing it. They misinterpret the silence as rejection and start chasing. That chasing confirms the avoidance fear. See, I'm being pulled in, losing control, so they retreat even further. The key is to understand that their retreat is not the same as disinterest. The silence is actually proof that the emotional stakes are high enough to trigger their defense system. That means you matter more than you think. I'll give you an example. Imagine someone who's terrified of heights. If you stand next to them on the ground, they're calm. But take them to the edge of a cliff, and their body goes into panic mode. The panic is not because the cliff is evil. It's because it's powerful. It demands respect. The same goes for love with an avoidant. When they feel that cliff edge intensity with you, they retreat to regain balance. It's not personal. It's physiological. Now, the most profound thing you can do in this moment is to stop taking their silence at face value. Learn to read between the lines. That distance they create is actually a form of emotional recalibration. They're trying to find a way to be close without losing themselves. If you can give them that space without punishment, without panic, you become the one person who doesn't add pressure to their inner war. You become the calm in the storm. And that changes everything, because here's the truth. Love for an avoidant is not measured in constant contact or dramatic declarations. It's measured in the fact that they keep coming back after the battle is over. It's measured and in the fact that they didn't ghost you entirely. They just needed to retreat long enough to gather the courage to stand on that cliff again. And if you can hold steady during those retreats, you'll start to see the pattern. They disappear because they feel too much, not too little. So the next time you're faced with their silence, instead of asking, why are they pulling away? Start asking. It's happening inside them that's too big to say out loud. That shift in perspective will not only protect your peace, it will keep you from sabotaging the connection that could over time evolve into something far deeper than you imagined. Silence is not the absence of love. For an avoidant, silence can be the evidence of it. It's the sound of someone fighting a war between their fear and their feelings. And if they're fighting that hard, it means you've already won a part of them they never intended to give. When it comes to avoidance, you have to understand something crucial. Love rarely announces itself with fireworks. It doesn't march in with flowers, bold proclamations, and grand romantic gestures. For them, love leaks out in the smallest, most unassuming ways. And if you're waiting for the big movie moment, you'll miss the truth staring you in the face. Microactions, that's the language of an avoidant in love. And I mean microscopic, so small, in fact, that most people would overlook them completely. They're not going to sit you down and say, I've been thinking about you all day. But they will remember that you like your coffee a certain way, and without you asking, they'll bring it to you. They won't announce, I'm protecting you. But you'll notice they subtly walk on the street side when you're together. They won't text love you, but they'll quietly fix something in your house without you realizing it. The reason this happens is rooted in psychology. For an avoidant is dangerous territory, threatens their sense of control and safety. Grand gestures demand vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like exposure. So instead, they speak in a coded language of action rather than verbal declaration. These small acts are like emotional fingerprints. You only notice them if you're paying attention. Here's the thing. Micro-actions are often more reliable than big gestures. A person can buy you flowers and write you a card without truly loving you. But remembering that you mentioned you had a stressful week, and then quietly making your life easier in some way, that's not performance, that's care at the subconscious level. That's love operating under the radar. Let's break down why this matters. Avoidants often grew up in environments where emotions weren't safe. Maybe they were dismissed, punished, or ignored. So they learned to show care without making it obvious, without risking emotional exposure. Their love style is stealthy by design. They don't come in the front door. They leave little signs on the windowsill, hoping you'll notice without forcing them to shout. The challenge for you is that if you measure love only by verbal affirmation or obvious acts, you'll completely misread them. You might think they don't care 'cause they don't say the words or plan extravagant dates. For them, letting you into their mental space enough to remember small details, and then acting on those details, is a monumental leap of intimacy. Think about it. If an avoidant remembers the exact brand of tea you drink and picks it up when they're out shopping, that means you've taken up residence in their mind. They were going about their day, not in a relationship mode, not prompted by a conversation, and you still showed up in their thoughts. That is the quiet power of love from someone who fears closeness, but can't stop themselves from letting you in. Now, here's the deeper philosophical piece. Love is not proven only by how loudly someone declares it, but by how consistently they invest in the little things. If you look closely, actions are actually more intimate than big ones. A grand vacation or a surprise gift can be planned in isolation. But micro-actions require ongoing observation. They require paying attention to you in real time. That's not accidental. That's intentional love, and here's the part most people never realize. Those micro-actions are often the avoidance way of testing safety. They're saying in their own language, I'm willing to put myself out there a little, but I need to see if it's safe. When you acknowledge those moments with appreciation, not pressure, not demands, you reinforce the idea that love with you is a safe space. That's how you slowly break through the emotional armor. This is where a lot of relationships collapse because someone mistakes a subtle expression for not enough. They push for more, thinking it will accelerate intimacy. But with an avoidant, that pressure can cause them to retreat, not because they don't feel anything, but because they feel too much and don't yet have the tools to express it like you expect. So, you have a choice. You can overlook these tiny moments, dismiss them as insignificant, and miss the entire language they're speaking, or you can train yourself to see them for what they are, breadcrumbs leading to the truth of their feelings. The truth is, love is not always about the loud, visible acts. Sometimes it's about the quiet, almost invisible ones, the ones that require you to pay attention, to notice the way they think about you when they think no one's watching. Because here's the reality, micro, actions or macro statements in disguise. For an avoidant, they're the safest way to say you matter to me without uttering the words. And when you learn to read that language, you'll realize that their love has been there all along, just written in smaller print. Love, in its purest form, isn't always shouted. Sometimes it's whispered in the smallest movements. The question is, are you quiet enough inside yourself to hear it? There's a reason people say the eyes are the windows to the soul. Because for someone who hides their feelings, the eyes will reveal what the mouth refuses to say. And with avoidance, this is often the most unfiltered, guarded moment you'll ever get from them. You can fake a smile. You can force a laugh. You can craft the perfect words. But you can't fully control what your eyes do when your heart reacts. Avoidant can be a master of emotional camouflage. They can control their tone, their expressions, even their body language to keep you at just enough distance. But when they love you, there will be moments where the eyes betray the fortress. You might catch them looking at you a second longer than necessary. You might notice that when you lock eyes, they quickly look away, not because they're distracted, because holding that connection feels too raw, too exposed. This is where most people misunderstand. They think breaking eye contact means someone isn't interested. But with avoidance, it's often the opposite. Looking directly at you when they have strong feelings is like standing too close to a fire. They can only handle it for short bursts before they have to pull back to avoid burning up. That's not detachment. That's the body's defense mechanism against overwhelming emotion. What's happening inside them in that moment is powerful. Eye contact activates parts of the brain connected to intimacy, vulnerability, emotional bonding. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, that activation is both magnetic and terrifying. They want the connection, but it triggers the same fight or flight wiring that pushes them to protect themselves. So, you get this push-pull dance, a lingering look followed by a retreat. It's not rejection, it's regulation. And here's something you need to understand. When they do hold your gaze, even for a few seconds, it's an enormous deal. For them, it's not casual, it's surrender. It's an unspoken moment where their guard slips and you see the truth. They spend so much energy hiding. In those moments, you're not just looking at their eyes. You're looking into the part of them that's terrified of being hurt, but still choosing to be present with you. This is why I tell people to stop obsessing over constant verbal reassurance with avoidance. Words can be carefully curated to keep you at arm's length. But the eyes, they're live streaming what's really happening in the heart. If you catch them watching you when they think you're not looking, that's love showing up in its purest, least filtered form. It's curiosity, it's longing, it's the quiet question in their soul, can I trust this, can I trust you? But here's where the philosophical piece comes in. You have to be the kind of person who can sit in that silence without demanding they fill it. Because when they look away, they're not running from you. They're running from the vulnerability that connection demands. If you can allow those moments to come and go naturally, You give them the safety to let them happen again. If you pounce on it, "Why are you looking at me like that? What's wrong?" You shut the door. They were just beginning to open. Think of it like watching a wild animal step out of the woods. If you rush toward it, it bolts. If you stand still, calm and non-threatening, it will linger longer next time. Avoidants are emotionally similar. The eyes are their first step toward letting you in. They have to know you won't chase them into hiding when they take that step. And this is where the real connection grows, when you learn to see the moments behind the moments, a glance across the room that's quickly averted, the softness in their eyes when you're speaking about something important to you, the flicker of vulnerability before they mask it with a joke. These are not small things. These are the cracks in the armor where the light of their love leaks out. Most people are so busy waiting for the perfect words that they miss the truth in the eyes, and that's tragic because with avoidance, the eyes will often say it long before the mouth does. The problem isn't that they don't love you, it's that they're not fluent in expressing it verbally without fear. So they speak through looks, through the way their gaze lingers, through the way it retreats and then returns. So pay attention. Not in a paranoid way, not in a way that overanalyzes every blink, but in a way that honors those fleeting moments as the rare windows they are. Those moments are not accidents. They're the truest confession an avoidant will give you until they've built enough trust to say the words out loud. When you stop chasing constant verbal confirmation and start reading the truth in their eyes, you'll see something profound. Love isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's staring right at you, hoping you'll recognize it before it hides again. And if you can learn to meet that look without fear, without pressure, you'll give them the safety to keep showing it to you longer, deeper, and without looking away. Because the eyes don't lie, and for an avoidant, they're the first place you'll see the love they're too afraid to say. Someone with an avoidant attachment style, emotional exposure isn't just uncomfortable. It feels like standing unarmored on a battlefield. They've spent years, maybe decades, building strategies to stay safe from emotional vulnerability. They avoid sharing too much. They keep their world tightly controlled, and they retreat at the first sign of being pulled too deep. Here's the fascinating part. When an avoidant loves you enough, they will choose discomfort over losing you. And that choice is monumental. You have to understand, for them, discomfort isn't just a passing inconvenience. It's a primal fear response. It's the feeling of walking into a dark room without knowing what's inside. Their entire nervous system is designed to keep them out of that room, yet love has a way of pulling them toward it anyway. That's the paradox. Love and fear existing in the same space, forcing them to choose. When an avoidance starts to override their instinct for self-protection, it's not because they suddenly became fearless. It's because you matter enough to make the fear worth facing. This is not a small shift, it's seismic. Witnessing someone take steps they've spent their whole life avoiding, if you see them opening up about something personal, if you see them staying in a conversation they'd normally walk away from, if you see them showing up to an emotionally charged moment when they could easily retreat, that's love, not accident. Think about it. Most avoidants are brilliant at escape. They can end conversations gracefully, change topics effortlessly, even vanish from situations without seeming rude. So, when they don't take those exits, it's intentional. They're resisting every internal alarm telling them to pull away. They're saying, "I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." That's one of the most profound statements of love you'll ever receive, even if they never say it out loud. This is where a lot of people misunderstand avoidance. They think vulnerability for them should look the same as vulnerability for a secure or anxious person. Long talks, big emotional confessions, visible displays of affection, but for an avoidant might look like agreeing to spend more time together than usual. It might look like letting you see them upset instead of hiding it. It might look like admitting they were wrong, even in a small way. Every one of those moments is them stepping into discomfort for you. They are choosing to override a lifetime of training that says, don't let anyone in too far. They're choosing connection over safety. That's not weakness, that's courage. And it's a courage most people will never recognize because they're too busy expecting vulnerability to look a certain way. Now, here's the philosophical truth. You cannot demand this choice from them. You can't force them to pick discomfort over safety because a moment it feels forced, it no longer feels safe and they'll retreat. The only way they can make this choice is if it's theirs, and it will always be theirs. Your role is to notice it, appreciate it, and create an environment where making that choice again feels worth it. That's where the connection deepens, when you acknowledge their courage, not just their comfort. If they open up to you, instead of making it about how you've finally gotten through to them, make it about honoring the fact that they trusted you enough to step into something that scares them. That reinforcement is powerful because it tells their nervous system this was worth it. This didn't hurt me, I can do this again. Here's the part most people miss when they choose discomfort for you. It's not just about that one moment. It's an investment in the future of the relationship. It's them saying in their own guarded way, I'm willing to expand the space I can hold for us. Every time they make that choice, the walls around them don't just lower for you, they start to lower in general. You're helping them rewire what intimacy feels like, and that's no small thing. So if you're with an avoidant, pay attention to the moments when they lean in instead of pulling back. Those are the moments you should remember because they're not casual. They're the relationship turning points, the text they send instead of ignoring argument they stay in instead of shutting down the personal detail they share without being asked. These are not accidents. These are loved fingerprints in a language you have to learn to read. When you see it, honor it. When you honor it, it grows. And when it grows, you'll realize something profound. Avoidants may love differently, but when they love you enough to step into fear, you're not just in a relationship. You're witnessing someone transform who they are for the sake of keeping you close. Love is easy when it's comfortable. The real proof is when someone chooses you, even when every part of them is screaming to run. If an avoidant makes that choice for you, you've just seen one of the rarest, most powerful expressions of love there is. When an avoidant pulls away, most people see it as the end. They think that's it, they're gone, they've moved on, but here's what you have to understand. The retreat is part of their design. It's not always about you, and it's not always about the relationship being broken. It's about their internal wiring kicking in to protect them from feeling overwhelmed. The pullback in their safety valve, it's how they regulate themselves when emotions run too high. Here's where the real magic happens when they come back. And I'm not talking about coming back because you chased them, guilt-tripped them, or tried to lure them in with some strategy. I'm talking about them returning entirely on their own because something inside them couldn't stay away. That's the moment you should pay attention to, because for an avoidant, the return is the proof. See, leaving is easy for them. They've practiced it their whole life. It's familiar. They know how to disappear into their own world, how to bury themselves in work, distractions, hobbies, anything that lets them escape emotional intensity. That's the path of least resistance, but coming back, that's the hard part. That's the part that goes against their very survival instinct. An avoidant returns without being chased. It means they've sat with themselves long enough to realize that the absence of you is more uncomfortable than the vulnerability of being close to you. That's not a small realization, that's a breakthrough. It means the pull of connection has overpowered the comfort of distance, and for someone whose whole identity has been built around self-reliance, that's massive. Return tells you two things. First, they've been thinking about you probably more than you've been thinking about them. Second, something about you has created a safe enough memory that they're willing to step back into that space even knowing it will challenge them again. Now, the reason I emphasize that they have to come back on their own is because the autonomy is everything to them. An avoidant doesn't want to feel cornered. They don't want to feel like they've been forced into emotional exposure. If they sense pressure, their instinct is to run farther. But if they return voluntarily, it means the decision was fully theirs, and that makes the connection 10 times stronger. Philosophically, think about what that says about love. Love isn't about chaining someone to you. It's about creating such a profound imprint on their soul that even when they're free to walk away, they choose to come back. And that choice made by someone whose entire life has been about self, P protection is worth more than 1,000 casual I love yous from someone else. Now, here's the tricky part. You can't manipulate your way to that return. You can't stage it, force it, or play mind games to make it happen. You can only influence it by the way you handle the retreat. If you handle it with panic, accusations, or endless pursuit, you reinforce their fears about closeness. But if you handle it with composure, respect for their space, and confidence in your own worth, you become the one place they can return to without dread. The return is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a simple text after weeks of silence.